The sun had just begun to sink below the horizon, casting long golden streaks across the dusty streets of the small town, where hope seemed like a foreign luxury. James, a boy of 17, trudged along the uneven cobblestone path, his stomach gnawing with a hunger that had become his constant companion. Poverty had wrapped its cold fingers around him from birth, leaving him with nothing but dreams too big for the little world he inhabited. His clothes were tattered, his shoes worn thin, and yet in his heart, a stubborn spark of determination refused to die. He had learned early that life didn't give handouts, that every coin, every morsel of food, had to be earned or begged for with humility. And it was on one of those bleak evenings, when the sun's warmth couldn't penetrate the chill in his soul, that he first met her. She was sitting on the wooden steps of her small family home, her dark skin glowing softly in the fading light, a quiet strength radiating from her slender frame. Her name was Amara, and though life had not spared her either, there was something about her smile that seemed to defy the weight of the world. James noticed her from a distance, hesitating, unsure if he had the courage to approach. But hunger, as it always did, pushed him forward. "Please," he murmured, almost inaudibly as he shuffled closer, the words tasting like shame on his tongue. "I haven't eaten in days." Amara looked up, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that startled him. There was no pity in them, no condescension, just a raw, honest understanding. Without a word, she disappeared inside her home and returned moments later with a small bowl of rice and beans, steaming and fragrant. The aroma alone made James's stomach growl louder than his shame. He knelt there on the dusty ground, hesitant as Amara handed him the food. "Eat," she said simply, her voice calm and steady, as if offering him a lifeline. He ate quickly, almost desperately, but not without stealing glances at her as she watched quietly. His heart raced, not just from hunger, but from the way she carried herself, from the kindness in her eyes, the gentle tilt of her head as she waited. He had never met anyone like her, someone who could extend compassion without expectation, who could see a person in need and respond without judgment. When the bowl was empty, he felt a mixture of gratitude and awe, and in that moment, as the last rays of sun bathed them in a soft golden light, something inside him surged with a boldness that frightened him, almost as much as it thrilled him. I don't have much," he stammered, his voice barely audible over the evening breeze. "But someday I'll be rich, I promise you." He swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words, of the dream he barely understood himself. "I'll marry you when I'm rich." The words sounded foolish, reckless, even absurd, but James didn't care. They were the truth of his heart, a vow whispered into the soft twilight. Amara studied him silently for a long moment, her gaze deep and knowing, before she let a small, almost imperceptible smile grace her lips. "Someday," she said softly, as if acknowledging his promise without fear or judgment. And with that, she turned and walked back inside, leaving him alone with his empty bowl and a heart swelling with a mixture of hope and longing. Years passed, and life, relentless, unkind, and indifferent, tested James in ways he had never imagined. Every day was a battle against despair, against the limits that poverty had placed around him like iron bars. But the promise he had made that evening to the girl who had fed him became a beacon, a fragile flame he carried in secret through the darkest nights. He worked tirelessly, often taking 2 jobs at once, sleeping in cramped rooms that smelled of damp and dust, surviving on scraps of food and the rare kindness of strangers. He endured humiliation and rejection, failures that would have crushed a lesser spirit, but he clung to that memory, to that vow, as if it were the only thing keeping him tethered to life itself. In the meantime, Amara's life unfolded with a quiet resilience that mirrored her character. She worked in a small bakery, rising before dawn to knead dough, to serve bread to faces that rarely saw the world with anything but self-interest. She had dreams too, but she carried them lightly, as though protecting them from the harshness of reality. And yet, every so often, she thought of the boy who had knelt on her steps all those years ago, the boy whose eyes had held a hunger for more than just food, who had dared to dream aloud. Life had taught her patience, endurance, and faith. And though she never expected to see him again, she felt a quiet assurance that promises, whispered in the heart of hardship, were never truly lost. The turning point came on a humid summer evening, the kind where the air clung to your skin like a second layer, and the city thrummed with restless energy. James, now a man in his late 20s, had returned to the town that had once confined him. His appearance had changed, sharp, confident, dressed in clothes that whispered of success, but the memory of that evening with Amara had never faded. He walked the familiar streets with a mixture of nostalgia and nervous anticipation, feeling the weight of years and the ache of unspoken words. And then he saw her. She was standing outside her small bakery, her hands dusted with flour, the same quiet strength emanating from her presence. Though life had added its own subtle lines and grace to her face, time had not diminished her beauty. It had refined it, made it more profound, more magnetic. James approached cautiously, his heart hammering in his chest. And when she finally noticed him, recognition flared in her eyes like a sudden spark. For a moment neither spoke. The world around them faded, leaving only the memory of a promise made under a setting sun, a vow that had survived years of separation and hardship. And as James took her hand, feeling the warmth and strength that had always captivated him, he knew that the journey had only just begun. He whispered the words that had carried him through countless nights of toil and doubt. "I've returned, and I've kept my promise." Amara's eyes glistened with tears, her voice soft yet steady. "You're here, just as you said you would be." And in that moment, two lives, shaped by struggle and sustained by hope, collided once more in a bond forged by loyalty, love, and the simple act of kindness that had started it all. The story of the poor boy and the girl who fed him was far from over. It was only the beginning of a new chapter, a story of redemption, reunion, and the enduring power of promises kept against all odds. And as the camera of your imagination pans out over this reunion, viewers, remember, sometimes the smallest acts of kindness change lives forever. Never underestimate a helping hand, a listening ear, or a promise whispered from the heart. If you believe in the magic of hope and the power of perseverance,